And now, the First Alert Storm Team, live from the 13 Now Digital Desk. This is Tropic Topics, sponsored by Peden Heating and Air Conditioning and Mariana Toyota.
Welcome to Tropic Topics. It is myself. I'm Chief Meteorologist Ross Whitley, and we have our weekend Met, Grace Thornton, here as well. She's the better-looking one to my left here. We are unfortunately having to do a rather serious Tropic Topics this time because we have, yes, another storm, and it is going to move into the Gulf. The only good news here, if there is any good news to take away from this situation, and we will certainly get into the serious aspects of this, is that for the most part, we should be relatively spared from any significant direct impacts. Now, we will still likely see some impacts to our area, certainly from swell, and we could also be talking about maybe even something more substantial if we have feeder bands. Severe weather could be a possibility. Also, heavy rain, which we need none of at this point in time, could also be an issue. So we're going to be keeping a close eye on the exact track and just how far east this thing can come. I have my doubts as to what the limitations of the eastward movement of this system could be, but we'll go over that in a minute. I will highlight that anyone watching this from the Louisiana area or the Mississippi coast should, yes, definitely be paying attention at this point, should obviously be going through their hurricane preparations. I don't think that this is one to mess around with. I believe that this will likely end up very nearly a major hurricane, if not a major hurricane. And I have said this in the past, and I will repeat it in the future. If we are forecasting a Category 2, then you need to prepare for a 3. If we are forecasting a 3, then you have to be prepared for a 4. Now, if I am saying a major hurricane is likely to occur, what I mean is major. It does not matter if it is a 3, 4, or 5. If you end up in the eye wall of a major hurricane, you are going to have significant impacts. It does not matter if it is a 3, 4, or 5 at that point in time, because the impacts to you in that eye wall are going to be the same. That's why they call them major hurricanes, because they cause major impact. So that's where we're standing at this point in time. Now, we're not going to see a direct landfall in the Panhandle here, but we could certainly see this shift far enough east that we have indirect impacts, and we are definitely going to be talking about swell. So let's dive right on into it. I will say that if you have questions or anything like that, we do have the streams up and running. I can see those questions that are being posted on my stream, which is my Facebook page, and or the WMBB TV Facebook page as well. I can see both because I have both of those streams up and running. Actually, I don't see the stream on the WMBB page, so maybe I lied there. Should be able to see it, but I'm not seeing that. Spencer will work on that for me in a minute. But let's get right into this.
I'm seeing it.
You do have it up? Okay, well, then you can see the questions. That's all that matters. So as we go into it, I always like to start off with water vapor. That's what we've got here. This is showing you the orange areas of dry air and the blue areas showing you where there is moist available air. And for the untrained eye, if you can pick out where our tropical depression is, hats off to you. Because for me as a trained meteorologist, it is still hard because this is not very organized at this point in time. I would say that much like what we talked about with Fred, that there's probably not a low-level center there at this point. So we certainly are going to see shifts in the initial part of the track, thanks to wherever the low-level center does develop. Much of like what I was talking about on air last night, where this develops will have a big impact on the eventual track. Now, because this has ended up on the north side of that area of interest which we were looking at, the beginning part of this is less important because the overall steering environment is pretty locked in, which is why the models are pretty locked in. There's a lot of dry air out there, and there's a couple weaknesses that are ongoing across the Atlantic. That is good news for us overall, the steering pattern here. Here's the satellite, and Grace, if you want to point out where our storm is, you can do so.
Well, where you see that kind of orange blob to the south of Port-au-Prince, it is just to the southwest of Jamaica. Very broad, very disorganized at the moment, but will be well, slowly but surely, or quickly but surely, making its way into more of a tropical storm where we'll see, you know, it get more organized and more looking like that classic kind of thing you see as it kind of gains traction towards Cuba and towards the southern, or I guess southeastern end of the Gulf of Mexico over the next few days here, even until about Saturday is when we're expecting it to get to that southern portion of the Gulf of Mexico where we're really going to be watching it closely.
Yeah, absolutely. And many of you have been asking about, well, what happened to all the Saharan dust? Well, it was out there, and it now has dissipated.
Technically, it's still there.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's still dust out there, but not a ton. And typically, whenever we do have a Saharan dust outbreak, it only lasts for about a week or so. What is concerning to me about this storm, and I know many of you questions, especially on the WMBB Facebook page, or many of you are asking questions about specific locations and areas. We're going to get to that. Just bear with us. We're going to get to the storm and talk about the impacts here, and I'm going to try to broad brush across our area. Now, obviously, with the storm not making direct impacts here and still hanging out in the Caribbean, it's probably going to be a day or two before we can say, well, this is what the swell is going to be here. This is how much rain is going to fall here, those kinds of things. Those details are still very specific to 24 to 48 hours out, and we're sitting more 76 to 96 hours out. So certainly in the window of knowing where this is headed, but not in the window where we can give you specific details as to how each individual area is going to be impacted. So just bear with us. We're going to go over that in just a second because I see a lot of those questions popping up. But what worries me most about this system is it's going to run into the Gulf of Mexico, which is very warm and has plenty of energy. Now, you can see a couple wake paths here from storms that we've had in the recent path. Notice the 84 hanging off to the south of Panama City. That's all thanks to Fred. Same thing as you go toward the Bend and even off of the west coast of the peninsula. That is the leftover wake, the turn up, the churn that Fred had has cooled the water off down there. But there's a very, very warm area around the shelf of Louisiana back over to Houston. You'll notice 85 and 86 degree lines showing up there. That is right where this storm is going. It looks like from the path that this storm is going to take advantage of the warmest waters across the Gulf of Mexico. Now, I harp on this all the time that the warm water is only one factor. You need to have moist air in front of it, check mark there, and you need to have relatively light winds aloft, check mark there. And then you want outflow assistance from other areas around the storm, check mark there. So all three of those things being a check means that this will likely go under rapid intensification at some point in time in its path over the Gulf of Mexico. Unlike Fred, where I said RI was unlikely because it was dealing with shear and dry air, this doesn't have that. So this will likely go under rapid intensification while it's moving across the Gulf of Mexico. Now, certainly there are possibilities of different things that happen to it where it cycles and never gets to that point. But certainly if we are talking about RI being a possibility, then the overestimation of strength is where I will lean, especially when we're talking about a favorable environment. So Category 2 is what's forecasted now. I see no reason that this won't end up being at least a 3. And again, major is major is major is major. It doesn't matter 3, 4, 5. It is still going to cause significant impact. So that is what we're talking about here. That is what concerns me about this storm. I will advise that if you have interest in Louisiana or interest elsewhere across the Gulf Coast, especially Louisiana, Mississippi, and West Texas coastline, then pay very close attention, have that plan ready to go, and my suggestion would be to leave. If you are in the direct path of this, leave. There's no reason to stay. There's nothing you can do from staying during a significant storm that is going to have any iota of matter. All you're going to end up doing is that if you do survive the storm, you're going to end up being stuck in a home without power for maybe a week, possibly longer, and no toilets, and it's just not fun. I mean, none of that is fun when you can just leave. So that would be my suggestions. If you have the capabilities and you're in front of this storm, I would suggest just not trying to ride it out. Just do yourself a favor and don't be there. You can always come back and check out what's left when you do come back. But I hate tropical systems for the main reason that it doesn't matter what the strength is. Somebody loses their life from tropical systems. It happens in every single system. Every one of them. There hasn't been a single system to ever hit the U.S. that didn't kill somebody. So I know that this storm heading to the coast will cause somebody's life. Don't let that be you. That would be my advice to those individuals that are in front of this path. So getting off of that, getting back to the details of this system, and this is where we are. As Grace pointed out, the big blob that's hanging out in the Caribbean, obviously not very organized. I think you would agree, Grace, that I don't think that the L there is a representation of the low-level center.
No, I don't believe, I agree with you. I still think it's pretty much an open wave at this point. There is hurricane hunters going out at right this moment who are going there to find that low-level center, and once they find that, we will get an even better look on where this storm is going. Well, we're pretty confident on where it's going, but honestly, like how fast it intensifies, when and where it's going to intensify, those sort of things, and the timing will be all impacted as we get more data from them this afternoon. So we'll probably see another update coming pretty soon.
Yeah, and for those concerned about what may be behind it, there are two other waves that are out there that we're watching. Both of the ones that are in the Atlantic appear that they will be fish storms at this point in time.
Yes.
We will have to continue to watch the same area of where this storm came out, just because some of the models are still indicating the weakness in the Gulf of Mexico stays in place. But the overall steering pattern, I posted this a couple of days ago, has actually verified quite nicely as to what this storm is doing, where this storm is going. You'll notice that there's a couple of waves out there, the brown dashed line showing that. So one wave probably going to follow the other wave and run up there in between the Atlantic, kind of shoot the goalpost, so to speak. We have an upper level low hanging off the coast of the U.S. on the east side. That's going to bring us more rain, yay, for our Friday, Saturday, and Sunday here across northwest Florida. So unfortunately, if you want a dry day, today is your day. It does appear that that moisture is moving in a little bit quicker than I wanted it to, so we may in fact have some shower activity this evening. Sorry, just the messenger. But certainly the biggest impact event at this moment in time that we can foresee is Tropical Depression 9 will likely become Ida. For those that are wondering, not that you have thought this, but the I-named storms actually get retired the most because they typically happen during peak season. The Ida is actually a replacement for
Irma?
Irma. Yes, Irma was the name on the last time this list was in use, and now we have Ida, and it is likely that this ends up being a major hurricane, which means it will probably get retired. That's the kind of significance that I believe that this storm will have, which is why we are preaching what we are preaching. But this is the forecast path. This is the latest cone and advisory based off of the National Hurricane Center, moving to the northwest at 13 miles an hour. You can see that plane right there. That's the hurricane hunters. They're on their way out. The last cone to this cone, there was no shift, mainly because there's not a whole lot of shifting going on with the models. They're overlaid on the cone here. They're pretty locked in right there just to the west of New Orleans. I could see this being a little further east, maybe New Orleans, Baton Rouge, but that's about it. In reality, the weakness is to the west, not to the east. So really, we're running on limitations as to how far east this can move. I do not see this being even as east as Mobile, certainly not as east as the Panhandle, mainly because there have been 0 model runs thus far that have put anything into the Panhandle. No operational models have done it. None of the ensembles have done it. So over a 4-day period, we're like 0 for 400 on solutions for producing something into the Panhandle. So I really, really doubt that we see anything shift further east than, say, maybe just slightly east of New Orleans. That would be the farthest east I could plausibly see this storm going. Do you agree, Grace?
Yes. Yes, I agree. And, as we're talking about that as well, we've got this cone in place, and I know sometimes a lot of people think that where the cone is where the storm stops, but also we have to think about here at home. I know, just because that track is not moving towards Panama City doesn't mean that we're not going to, well, it means that we're not going to get the direct impacts of this storm, but here at home, we're probably going to see something. Definitely a little bit of swell, definitely a possibility of some hefty rain bands coming through the area as well, say Monday and even into Tuesday. As it becomes a depression, it's going to shift its way eastward over the southeast, and it's going to be trailing behind it some rain as well. So while we're not seeing those direct impacts like Louisiana is, we still have to deal with kind of the aftermath, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we will definitely see feeder bands and swell issues as the storm does work in. This is the European model, so it is a little further off to the west, and as Grace was discussing there, the wind initially on Sunday is going to be out of the east-southeast, and we're going to have some significant wind, at least over the water. We're not going to see much on land, but this is certainly going to be pushing water up into our area. I think swell that is created from this storm works in. We could see maybe wave heights up to 10, maybe 14, 15 feet work their way into the coast. So I definitely think that we are going to see some beach issues with this storm. That is obviously more impactful, in my opinion, probably from Cape San Blas east, just based off of the wind direction here. You'll notice that regardless of if there's a shift a little bit further north or a shift a little further south, the track and the angle that this storm is taking is going to give us that same kind of wind direction. So we're not going to see a shift in our overall swell forecast because this storm's angle of approach. So this is running right on the edge of the high pressure ridge, and certainly likely ends up being a very, very strong storm as it does approach Louisiana, and this is going to bring us that wind out of the east-southeast. And then as it does move into Louisiana, you'll notice the wind on the far right side of the screen there. I know you're paying attention to the wind swath and the miles per hour that are showing up there, showing the Euro showing a Category 3 here. But on the right side of the screen, you'll notice the wind now out of the south across our beaches. So we'll go from the east-southeast to the wind out of the south, and eventually the wind out of the southwest, which means not only are we going to have beach issues Sunday, Monday, but we're probably going to have them Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Potentially we don't see improvements until our wind shifts to out of the northwest on Friday. So we're going to see some significant beach issues from waves, swells, possible erosion, maybe even coastal flooding from this storm, and that's even if this does go that far west. Now, obviously, we have bigger impacts with rain issues as well as the swell if this ends up a little further north on that approach to Louisiana or a little further east on that approach to Louisiana. So we are definitely going to have impacts from this system. They just might not be direct impacts. You'll notice this does curve back up off to our north, so we will still be dealing with extra leftover moisture as we go into Wednesday and Thursday because, we need more rain, but that is definitely going to be an issue. The GFS is a little further off to the east here, and it is, in my opinion, wrong. I just don't think it's going to end up as far east as the GFS shows, but it does give you a good idea of the potential for the solution as we do look at what the GFS has to offer, and clearing out the Euro model here, showing the wind eventually getting better by Friday and that system gone out of here. But this is the GFS, so Grace, you want to walk us through it?
Yep, so here's Friday, 11 a.m. That's when, it's set to make its way across western Cuba. We're going to start to feel that, and this is not the wind swath here. This is the rain as well. So for the GFS, it's going to make its way. We're going to be watching it. Definitely on Saturday is probably going to be the biggest area of, how much is it intensifying? That's probably where we're going to see it rapidly intensify. If it does do that, which it's looking like it probably will, heading towards Sunday around 2 p.m., chances for rainfall here, we're definitely going to have those only about 1 inch by 2 p.m., and that's going to build up over the afternoon and through the evening hours. Definitely New Orleans at the peak of that, 8 inches, probably above that in many places, and over towards Mobile that starts to wean off just a little bit up to 6 inches, and here even towards our western counties probably 4 to 6 inches, maybe a little bit more in isolated places. And we have today really is our day of dry, quote-unquote weather. We are going to have some showers moving in later today, but we really have not had a break from hefty storms, scattered storms for the last 10 days or so. So and especially with Fred last week, we've got a lot of wet ground out there. So one of the main impacts here is we do have a lot of loose ground. A lot of trees are likely to be easily swayed by whatever winds are coming, and especially if we do get some heavy rainfall in there. So that's kind of like what I'm most worried about for this system as we head even into next week on Wednesday. Definitely something to look for, or not look forward to, but be aware of.
I think the GFS here is a little too far east, and it might be slinging a little too much moisture our way based off of it being a little too far to the east, but certainly gives you an idea of what kind of feeder bands we could be dealing with if it does end up, say, on that path around New Orleans, which in my opinion is about as far east as this system ends up going based off of the overall synoptic pattern. If this were to be the case, 4 inches of rain over Panama City or Lynn Haven would certainly have some issues just because of how wet it has been. Also, the feeder bands working across would also pose a threat for tornadoes. I mean, what we saw, everyone's storm of memory on the tornado threat goes back to Ivan. That was in 2004, and that made landfall in Alabama. That was over toward Mobile. It was not anywhere close to us, and certainly the feeder bands allowing the rotation there to bring it in. But certainly the threat for tornadoes would be much more confined to Mobile and the western half of the Panhandle than it would be as far east as Panama City. So obviously waves are going to be the biggest impact from the system, at least as I see it now. And then rain may be an impact if it ends up being this far east and we have this much moisture thrown this far east. Those are 2 big ifs, because you'll see the drop off there as you get toward Tallahassee, where there's literally no rain. So it won't take much of those feeder bands not getting into our area for us to not see much rain at all from this system. But certainly as it does track off to the north and then eventually off to the north and east, we will have leftover moisture around, which will enhance our daily showers and thunderstorms. That'll be the 4th time this year that we've had enhanced moisture around thanks to a tropical system working by. And we had Elsa, Claudette, Fred, and now that this would be Ida, this would be the 4th time that we'd be talking about enhanced
Elsa
moisture.
actually gave us a drier day.
Yeah, but I'm talking about on approach, because you had the upper low that moved in. So on approach, Elsa brought us some more rain, and then when it left, Elsa brought us some more rain. So yeah, but I agree with you. The day of Elsa, we did in fact end up dry.
Claudette's a different story.
Claudette did bring us a lot of rain. So this is a graphic that I made a couple years back, and I think it comes in handy as far as timing and approach. You'll notice that I do not have our area in that ready set section. I do have the western half of the Panhandle, the far western. So Okaloosa, Santa Rosa, and Escambia counties would be in that ready. That means that you should be putting together and have the hurricane kit ready to go. You should be thinking about the impacts that could be needed, and definitely have the plan set of what potential actions you need to take if there is a major shift in this cone. Which, again, I don't really see happening, but certainly the impacts on the western half of the Panhandle are more easily swayed by a shift in the forecast than, say, Panama City and places further off to the east. The yellow areas, those are the areas you should be in action mode. So that is where you should be putting your hurricane plan in place. You should be prepared to leave if told to do so. You should definitely have the supplies for at least a week without power. You should have enough water to drink for every person in your household for at least a week. That's a necessity if you are planning to stay. If you're not planning to stay, then you need to make sure that you also have that plan in place. Certainly if you are in the yellow or red area, you should be putting the plan of where do I need to go, where do I want to go, calling around, those kinds of things. If you are planning to leave, you should be doing that if you are in the yellow area. And in the red area, I would say now is the time to be in full activation mode. I did include a little further off to the west, not because I think that this is going to shift that far off to the west, but because that area still hasn't recovered from Laura, and Delta. So certainly the individuals that dealt with those two storms last year, I wouldn't even mess around. Just get out. It doesn't matter if it does end up slightly off to your east and you end up on the western side. Those individuals that are still recovering from the two major systems last year, I just see no point in it. That's why I put you in that go category. Most of the time I put the go category at the center of the storm and then off to the east, not off to the west, but just based off of what they had to deal with last year. That's why I do have that area in the go category. So if you are planning to stay, and again, that is against my suggestion for those in the red, I would say that you should be prepared to leave. And that does include the Mississippi coastline, because I think, again, this could shift as far east as New Orleans. So the Mississippi coastline would certainly be majorly impacted by this system if it did shift that far east to New Orleans. Again, I don't think we're going to see a lot of shifts here. We're talking about less than 96 hours on approach. This would be sometime late Sunday night, maybe early Monday morning that this was moving ashore. And certainly that doesn't give you a ton of time to prepare, but I would be doing so now, and I would be acting like, if you were in the red, I'd be acting like the storm was going to center you up, square you up. That's what I would be doing if I was in the red. And then obviously the green areas, definitely want to go through your preparation, definitely want to consider to think about the storm and watch the storm closely. And that includes us here in the Panhandle, may even want to extend that green area all the way to the coast through the Panhandle, just because we are going to have a whole lot of coastal issues, I believe, from swell from this storm. And certainly if we have feeder bands, then we may have some flooding issues too. So that would also be a potential impact to our area. But overall, that's what we're talking about here. So no major direct impact to the Panhandle, but certainly we could see significant impacts, even though I don't think that we're going to see a direct landfalling system really anywhere close to us. I think this is Louisiana's storm. Unfortunately, I think that that's where this thing is headed. That's just where the synoptic pattern sets up. That's where the weakness is. So I don't see shifts. I don't see this really moving a whole lot outside of where the cone is now. Certainly think that this is going to be a high impact event. You got anything to add, Grace?
Nope. I mean, I guess something I always kind of like to add is if you kind of know about your property and you know you're susceptible to bad weather, maybe take some extra precautions as well. So that's all I really have to say.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'm looking through questions here.
Especially because we've had so much rainfall over the last week and a half.
Yeah. The rainfall issue with just how wet it's been is definitely playing a role in the impacts to our area, because it's not going to take much rain for us to have significant impacts to our area just because it's been so wet. So that is something to consider, especially if you've flooded recently. You may want to think about that too in the coming days if we have a shift in the forecast as far as our rainfall goes. Again, GFS is on the high end of the rainfall. The Euro doesn't put much rain here at all. So, and they're not that far off from each other as far as what the storm looks like, how strong the storm is, or where the storm's going. They're just slightly different in the overall synoptic pattern. So GFS has a weaker high. That's a known bias. It typically catches onto the high day of. So like tomorrow, if you see the GFS shift west, that'll be because it suddenly realized that there's a high pressure system hanging out over the Carolinas. I don't know why it does that, but that is a known bias. It's why we see every storm that goes up the northeast shift west as it approaches the northeast, because it always misses the high over the Atlantic. Same thing happens with tropical systems here too. So I don't think that the GFS is correct on the track, but certainly is giving a plausible solution. So, you know, you have to consider both things. We're not telling you that what we're saying here is going to be 100% absolutely correct. What we're telling you is we're giving you a range of solutions of what the possible things that this storm could do. And I believe that this is going to be a very significant storm for those that get heavily impacted by it. And I believe that we could have impacts here across the Panhandle. I certainly think that those could be significant based off of your individual locations. Obviously, if you're right on the coastline, and we have major swell and coastal erosion, then that's going to be significant to you. If we have a feeder band set up over us and we have 5 inches of rain in 4 hours, that's going to be significant, especially if it happens in an area that doesn't need any rain. So you do want to think about that as we approach those the coming days in the forecast and whatever shifts that we talk about. Remember, it's always about impacts. It's not about where the storm's going or the storm itself. It's always about impacts, because every location, every spot of our area from the Gulf Coast all the way down to the tip of the peninsula of Florida has different impacts on every storm. So always think about yourself and the impacts that are coming for you, not the overall area. But all we can do is give you the solutions based on the overall area, because that's what we're looking at. So,
and I see a lot of people in the comments being like, a week later, and then this is happening. I mean, this is totally different than Fred. Totally different. We've got a different range of impacts, different track, of course. Every storm is always different. So you definitely want to be, you know, taking your experiences probably from Fred, but definitely listening to this current forecast and taking into effect what we've experienced over the last week with the rain and everything. All the storms are different, and all the impacts are going to be variations of those impacts. So that's just another thing to add.
Yes. Yes. So anyways, yeah, I've seen a lot of questions there too. You know, just like, you know, what we have to deal with, Michael, you know, Louisiana has had to deal with probably far worse in the relative short distance of now probably 4 major hurricanes in a year's time. So the weather doesn't care. It doesn't care that we don't want a storm. It doesn't care that there's that it's heavily impacted any area in the past. It doesn't care. It's going to continue to be weather, which is why we have to stay on top of it, why we have to be prepared for whatever is headed our way. So, you know, I certainly care that you are feeling what you're feeling as storms are approaching, but as far as the weather, the environment, it definitely does not. So that's why you do have to pay attention to those impacts, and certainly why you want to pay attention to us as we do continue to update the forecast. Again, don't see a significant shift off to the east, but I do think that we will see impacts, so you definitely want to continue to pay attention to the forecast. And if you do know people that are in Louisiana that are going to be directly impacted by this storm, maybe offer a helping hand. Maybe offer up your home for some individuals to come stay while this storm passes. Certainly could be getting together food supplies and things like that to send over there, because they're certainly going to need it after this storm works on through. All of those things are things that you can do to help out. And keep in mind, we're not done with hurricane season after this storm passes through. We still have several more weeks of peak season to go. I think that the next 3-4 weeks are going to be very active with storms. Things do look at least somewhat favorable for us as far as the pattern is concerned, that we have the similar kind of setup that we do now that's kind of protecting the southeast and Florida in general. So I think that that lasts for another week or so. So you never know. Beyond that, maybe we're talking about a storm approaching us again. So certainly want to continue to be prepared as we do go throughout the rest of hurricane season. You got anything over there, Spencer?
Curious about the 9.
The 9.
Where did the 9 come from?
The 9. That is the number of storms. We are on the 9th tropical depression.
9th potentially named storm.
Yes, that's where the 9 came from. And if you're wondering where 99L came from, if you were paying attention to that before we got tropical depression 9, the National Hurricane Center uses 90 to 99 as far as the L designation goes. The reason they don't use A is actually because A is used in the West Pacific. So they don't use A, which would make sense because the East Pacific uses E. So you would think that the Atlantic would use A, but it was already being used by the West Pacific, and so we don't
L
use it.
means Atlantic.
So L means Atlantic, yes.
We pay attention to those.
Yep, and they give 10 designations. They go 90 to 99, and then once they get to 99, they go back to 90. Yep. So the next low pressure out there that they designate as an area of interest will be L-90. So there you go. That's a brief explanation on all of that. But If you don't have the Storm Track 13 app, here's my pitch. You should download it. Shame on you if you don't have it yet. It's fantastic. It is really, really handy when it comes to tropical systems as well as severe weather. I mean, we just did this last Monday. Certainly, you were getting all the flash flood warnings and all of that kind of stuff, and the information was being passed on. You can also submit photos. It's one thing that I was really wish you guys had done more of during Fred. Not that I wanted you outside, but I would have appreciated had you sent us more content that we could share. That way we could just say, hey, look, this is what's going on. This is a person that is at this location. They have these storms. Now, I know we lost power and stuff like that, so maybe you physically couldn't send it to us because you didn't have internet or something like that. But yeah, I mean, send us photos. You can do that through the Storm Track 13 app. That would be great. That helps us push out that content as well as talk about what's going on locally. And you can track the storm. It has the fan on there. You can turn the tropical fan on. You can turn on the spaghetti models. You can do all of that. Everything that we just showed here is in our Storm Track 13 app. You can keep up with the latest with us on social media. My social media, Grace's, and Kristen, who was not available today because she's doing a little staycation. So happy for her. I'm not jealous at all.
Good day for it.
Not jealous at all. Yeah, it was a great day for it. But yes, certainly keep up with the latest on the forecast here. Again, I don't see significant shifts and changes in the forecast coming, mainly because we're so close to this actually being in the Gulf and making landfall, and because the overall pattern here is pretty simple. This isn't a Fred setup where we're talking about, well, this storm's going to be heavily sheared and it's going to relocate its center over and over and over again. No, this is, once it's there, and it's going to be following that high pressure ridge. So we're not going to see major shifts in the track. Maybe slightly east, slightly west. Those are certainly possible. Timing issues could change as to when it goes to landfall. But I think that this is, you know, a West Texas, Louisiana, or Mississippi coastal area storm. I don't think that it is going to go out of that range. Really don't think that it goes outside of Louisiana. I think this ends up being a Louisiana storm. But, you know, that's just what I think. That's just what I see. So we're going to leave it with that for here. Obviously, if we need to do any kind of special coverage or anything like that, we'll come back to you and do that way. And again, you can keep up with us on mypanhandle.com, the MyPanhandle mobile app, and the Storm Track 13 app.
Thank you for watching Tropic Topics, sponsored by Peden Heating and Air Conditioning and Marietta Toyota. Be sure to download the Storm Track 13 app today to stay up to date with all of the latest weather information. For more local news, weather, sports, and more, visit mypanhandle.com.